Hi, I'm Lindsay Coates, and welcome to New Sauce podcast series. Today, we are speaking with Amanda Harley of Black Label Strategies. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So let's just dig right in. What is ROI Based Analysis, and why would any medical practice want to take the time to do it?
ROI Based Analysis is actually digging into the financial data of your practice and then interpreting that data to actually make and implement strategic decisions about your practice for the growth and the future of the practice. Similar to when a physician actually uses a SOAP note process where you're gathering subjective data and objective data and historical information. What symptoms are they having? What medications are they on? And then you actually evaluate and analyze that data to form a diagnosis. And then you develop a plan and implement that plan with the patient. Similar to the SOAP note process is ROI-based analysis. You're actually evaluating the historical performance of your practice. You're digging into the numbers to understand really what's going on, what's happening from various different viewpoints, and then analyzing the data, formulating a plan, and then implementing that plan. And then as you go through working your plan, you actually go back and evaluate and tweak as necessary. So it's very similar to how you treat a patient. It's just that typically we don't talk about these types of processes and methodologies because we typically focus on compliance and bookkeeping and accurate tax returns. All are necessary and very, very relevant. But when you actually want to focus on the growth of your business, you start to dig into the numbers and what they're telling you.
Excellent. So what are some of the questions that, office managers or physicians should be asking to find out where their practice stands financially?
Well, one of the first questions I like to ask is, where does your profit come from? And typically, and this is across the board with all businesses, most entrepreneurs actually don't know where their profit is coming from. They can tell you, I actually see this many patients a day, or I'm billing this much, but they rarely know where the profit is coming from. So actually the cash that you use to fund your business, where does it come from? Who's generating it, and which insurance company is contributing the most to it? There's other elements, what is your practice going to look like in 12 to 24 months? Those are questions that you should be asking, and you need to know the answers to it in order to prepare for the future of the practice.
So what are some other examples of ROI-based analytics? You just mentioned a few. Those are pretty much the well-rounded ones, right?
Right.
Is there anything else specific?
Absolutely. You can look at how long does it take to actually collect from the time that you bill. You look at how long your AR is, the cash cycle length. How long does it take for you to actually get money in the door from the time that you see the patient? Right. Another wonderful analysis that you can do is an insurance concentration analysis. This is actually where you evaluate each insurance and what percentage do they contribute to your practice. So when you start to evaluate, when you start to compare, then you can really see what's driving your numbers.
So what is an insurance analysis then? What kind of data are you looking for when you're looking at these numbers?
Well, typically you're actually going to pull reporting that you can get from your management software. The graphs that we're actually reviewing here are ones that I've pulled from a new MD software. But any practice management element of your system, you'll be able to pull this information. You'll typically pull the revenue, or the billings that you do. You'll pull the adjustments, and you'll pull the collections. And this is you can do it by patient, you can do it by insurance company, you can do it by doctor, but typically those are the elements that you want to include because that allows you to actually begin to compare which insurance company is contributing the most to your business.
So that robust reporting capabilities is really mandatory in order to do all this.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So when you're looking at insurance analysis and you're going through your payers, what are the types of things that you want to look for?
Well, you want to see which one has the highest profit margin. Now, when I look at profit margin, it's a little bit different in a physician's practice, because we typically think of profit margin as I make a product and the cost of that product is my cost of goods sold and what's left over is my profit. But in a physician's office, it's different. You actually look at what you're billing out and you deduct the adjustments that you have per your contract, which then you're left with the profit of each of those contracts, which is the collections. So when you're evaluating your insurance, you want to look at all of those aspects. And then you want to see how those compare to each other. So from a profit margin perspective, which one contributes the most profit to my business? Because ultimately, that's where the cash comes from.
Right.
It's not how much you're billing, because that doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's what kind of cash can you collect from each of these.
So what other types of things should you analyze? I mean, if you're looking at insurance payers, should you also be looking at your associates or the other, employees in the office and where they're
Absolutely. There's several other analyses that you can perform. An associate analysis is definitely top on the list. Also, just evaluate, physicians get bombarded all the time with the latest and greatest equipment. And you need to evaluate, do a cost-benefit analysis of whether you actually need to bring that equipment in. It's not just about how much the equipment costs, but how much time is it going to take to learn that equipment, how much time does it take away from you seeing patients, and how much revenue are you actually going to be able to collect, and how much profit are you going to be able to collect from each of these new pieces of equipment. But when you're evaluating your associates, the same type of analysis that we do from the insurance perspective, we can do on our associates.
Okay.
So you can evaluate how much revenue they're bringing in, how much profit they're bringing in, and then begin to compare them with each other. So if we take a look at the graphs, for example, you'll see on the left-hand side, you'll see the dollars. On the right-hand side, you'll see the profit margin percentage. And you'll see that there's 3 associates here. Now, I want you to take a look at number 2, physician number 2. When you look at physician number 2, you see that the profit margin is way down. But yet, they actually bill the most. So what that's telling you is that they're doing a lot of activity without a lot of profit.
So it kind of like what procedures they're doing that pay out more?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a perfect question to ask, because you're interpreting the results of this data.
Okay.
You're saying, what is physician number 2 doing or not doing that
Right.
the other physicians are doing? So then that allows you to take this even further to dig into what's happening. But if you don't look at it on a holistic basis, if you just dig into the CPT codes and figure out which ones pay you the most money, you'll actually be losing sight of the bigger picture. And you'll be losing sight of where you actually need to focus your attention. Because if you start immediately with the granular data, you won't be able to see that, for example, on the insurance slide, we had maybe the top 8 or 10 insurance companies driving 80% of our business.
Gosh.
And if you take a look at the next slide from the associate analysis perspective, you're actually going to see the procedures or encounters, either way you want to just call it, and you'll see the total revenue and the total payments and the profit margin on each of those. Now, what you need to analyze here is who is actually generating the most in terms of procedures, okay? And then analyze what is their profit margin percentage and how much of their payments, obviously, in relation to the total revenue. And then take a look at who's doing the least in terms of number of procedures. And what are they doing? Because actually what you'll see here is that the physician doing the least amount of procedures is actually the highest in terms of profit margin. So what is he or she doing that the other two are not doing? Basically, they're doing less effort with the biggest impact. And so this actually allows you to dig in again to what you were referring to before. Dig into those numbers underneath. What is underlying? what's that underlying data look like for physician number 3? I bet you it will look very different when you analyze it across the board from a CPT code perspective. When you actually look at it, it'll look very different to how they're coding. What modifiers are they using? What diagnosis are they using? Diagnosis 1, 2, 3, or 4. How are they coding? That allows you to actually have a pinpoint coding analysis and actually improve your practice across the board.
Gosh, there's a lot to look at, huh?
There is a lot to look at.
No. So what advice would you have for practices or office managers that are looking to do this type of thing but don't necessarily have the skill?
Well, the first place I'd start with is actually calling your practice management software company, because I can guarantee you they can walk you through where to find maybe some of these tools. Some practice management softwares actually have some of these types of reporting built in. So start there first, because they're certainly going to be very helpful in giving you tutorials. And then the next place, when you're looking at the business as a whole and actually analyzing from a financial perspective, you can actually talk to your CPA and ask them, hey, here's what I need to do to actually analyze what's going on in my practice to grow the business. And they will be able to point you in the right direction.
So if you were to leave us with 2 main ideas today, what would you say?
Well, I would say that you actually already are armed with the tools to analyze this data. Typically, people are scared of numbers, but the reality is as a physician and as a critical thinker, you're already armed with the tools necessary. Apply the SOAP note process to your financials, and you'll actually grow the business. I can guarantee that. I've seen it time and time again. When you actually just dig in a little bit, I'm not asking you to dig in a lot, but dig in a little bit, and you'll grow your practice.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Amanda. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. And please join us next month for another edition of NewsOff's podcast series.